He brought his mistress to the company gala to celebrate his promotion. He left his wife at home, laughing that she wasn't high class enough to be seen with him. He thought he was the king of the world, about to shake hands with the mysterious owner of the billion-dollar empire he worked for. But when the spotlight hit the stage and the CEO turned around, the blood drained from his face. The woman standing at the podium wasn't a stranger. It was the wife he had just betrayed. And she wasn't holding a microphone. She was holding his termination papers. Scott Aldridge adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Armani suit, checking his reflection in the tinted window of the limousine before the driver opened the door. He looked expensive. He looked powerful. He looked like a man who was about to become the regional director of Meridian Dynamics, the largest logistics conglomerate on the East Coast. Next to him, Sasha Miller giggled, running a manicured hand down his lapel. She was wearing a scarlet dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark contrast to the conservative black tie attire of the other guests, filtering into the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York City. She was 23, vibrant, and looked at Scott with the kind of adoration that fed his ego like gasoline on a fire. "You look like a movie star, Don," Sasha whispered, nipping at his ear. "Everyone is going to be so jealous." "They should be," Scott said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Tonight is the night everything changes, Sasha. The board has been keeping the identity of the new global CEO under wraps for 6 months. Tonight is the reveal, and I have it on good authority from Gary in HR that the new boss is looking to clean house and promote young, hungry blood. That's me." He stepped out of the car, the flash of paparazzi cameras blinding him for a moment. He extended a hand to Sasha, parading her up the red carpet. He didn't care who saw. In his mind, he had already outgrown his life at home. His life at home was Vivian. Thinking of Vivian made Scott sneer slightly. His wife of 7 years was serviceable. She was quiet, plain, and content with her little garden and her books. She wore oversized sweaters and never wore makeup. When he had told her he had a late business meeting tonight, she had just nodded and asked if he wanted leftovers left in the fridge. She had no ambition. She had no fire. She was an anchor dragging him down, while Sasha was the balloon lifting him up. "Scott, my man!" Scott turned to see Greg Thorne, a mid-level manager from the finance department, approaching with a glass of champagne. Greg's eyes widened as they landed on Sasha. "And who is this stunning creature?" Greg asked, his grin sleazy. "This is Sasha," Scott said loudly, making sure the nearby executives heard him. "My associate, and my good luck charm for the evening." Sasha beamed, clinging to Scott's arm. "Donnie says he's going to run this place soon." Greg laughed, clinking his glass against Scott's. "I wouldn't doubt it. You've got the look, Don. By the way, where's the missus? Vivian, right? I thought corporate spouses were mandatory for the gala." Scott waved his hand dismissively. "Vivian? Please. She wouldn't survive 5 minutes in a shark tank like this. She's at home knitting or whatever she does. Besides, tonight is about image. You dress for the job you want, and you bring the partner that fits that lifestyle. Vivian, she's the past. Sasha is the future." He said it with such casual cruelty that even Greg looked momentarily uncomfortable. But the mood was swept away as the ballroom doors opened. The room was a sea of velvet, crystal chandeliers, and the smell of old money. This was the inner sanctum of Meridian Dynamics. Scott maneuvered Sasha through the crowd, ignoring the whispered gossip. He felt invincible. He spotted the empty podium at the front of the room, emblazoned with the gold Meridian logo. "See that stage?" Scott whispered to Sasha. "In an hour, I'm going to be shaking hands with the owner, and once I get that promotion, I'm filing the papers. I'm done with Vivian. I'm going to buy you that penthouse in Tribeca." Sasha squealed, kissing him on the cheek. "You're the best, baby. I can't wait to be the wife of a CEO." Scott smirked. He had no idea that the wife of the CEO was a title that was already taken, and she was much closer than he thought. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, casting the crowd into a hush. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the center stage. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished board members, and valued employees, thank you for joining us for the 50th Annual Meridian Gala. Tonight is a historic night. As you know, since the passing of our founder, the company has been guided by a silent trust. Tonight, the chairman of that trust steps forward to take full operational control as your new global CEO." Scott leaned forward, his heart hammering. This was it. He squeezed Sasha's hand so hard she winced. "Here we go," he muttered. "Watch. It's probably old man Kensington, or maybe that ruthless guy from the London branch." "Please welcome." The announcer's voice rose to a crescendo. "The majority shareholder and new chief executive officer of Meridian Dynamics, Mrs. Vivian Aldridge." The room erupted in polite applause, but Scott didn't. Clap, he froze. The champagne glass in his hand slipped, shattering on the marble floor with a sharp crash that echoed in his ears. Vivian Aldridge. "That's a common name," Scott stammered, his face losing all color. It can't be." But then the heavy velvet curtains parted. Walking onto the stage was a woman who looked like Vivian, but also nothing like the Vivian he knew. Gone were the oversized sweaters and the messy bun. The woman on stage wore a tailored midnight blue power suit that looked like it cost more than Scott's car. Her hair was sleek, sharp, and styled in a commanding bob. She wore diamonds around her neck that glittered under the stage lights. Diamonds Scott had never seen before. She walked with a predator's grace, confident and terrifying. She approached the microphone, her gaze sweeping over the audience of 500 people. "Oh my God," Sasha whispered, looking from the stage to Scott. "Donnie, isn't that your wife?" Scott couldn't breathe. His brain was short-circuiting. No, it's impossible. She's at home. She's a nobody. She gardens. She doesn't know anything about logistics." But the woman on stage spoke, and her voice was unmistakable. It was the same voice that had asked him if he wanted coffee that morning, but now it was steeled with a cold authority he had never heard. "Good evening," Vivian said, her voice crisp and amplified. "For the last 7 years, I have watched Meridian grow from the shadows. My father built this company on integrity. When he passed, I chose to learn the business from the ground up, quietly observing how our managers treat their teams and their families. I wanted to see who was loyal to the mission and who was only loyal to their own ego." Scott felt a wave of nausea. She observed. He frantically looked around. People were starting to turn toward him. The shattering of his glass had drawn attention, and now, as people connected the dots between the CEO's last name and the man sweating profusely near the back, whispers began to circulate. "It's a mistake," Scott hissed to Sasha, grabbing her arm. She must have crashed the party. She's insane. She's trying to embarrass me." "She's on the stage, Donnie." Sasha pulled her arm away, looking at him with dawning horror. "They announced her." "It's a prank," Scott insisted, his narcissism refusing to let him accept reality. "She paid someone. She's jealous of us. I have to stop this." Driven by a suicidal mix of panic and arrogance, Scott did the unthinkable. He started pushing his way through the crowd toward the stage. "Excuse me, out of the way," Scott barked at a senior VP. On stage, Vivian paused mid-sentence. Her eyes, sharp as lasers, locked onto the commotion in the third row. She saw him. She saw the man she had loved, the man she had supported while he climbed the corporate ladder, the man who had come home smelling of cheap perfume for months. And she saw the woman in the red dress standing behind him. Vivian didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply stopped speaking and leaned into the microphone, a small, icy smile playing on her lips. "It seems," Vivian said, her voice echoing through the silent hall, "that we have a question from the floor. Mr. Aldridge, how kind of you to join us. And I see you've brought a guest." Scott reached the edge of the stage, his face red. "Vivian, get down from there immediately," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You're making a fool of yourself. I don't know who you paid to get up there, but this is a corporate event, not one of your book clubs." The entire room gasped. The silence was deafening. Vivian looked down at him, not with anger, but with the pity one might feel for a bug before crushing it. "Security," Vivian said softly, but the microphone picked it up perfectly. "Please do not remove him yet. I think my husband has a few things he'd like to say to his boss." She took a step back, gesturing to the stairs. "Come up, Scott. If you want the floor, take it." Scott blinked. He looked back at Sasha, who was backing away into the crowd, pretending not to know him. He looked at the stage. He smoothed his suit jacket, his delusion kicking in again. Maybe she really is the CEO, he thought wildly. And if she is, then I'm the husband of the COO. I'm untouchable. He walked up the stairs, a smug grin returning to his face. He thought he was walking into a partnership. He didn't realize he was walking into his execution. Scott stood next to Vivian on the raised platform, the heat of the stage lights beating down on him. For a fleeting second, he felt a surge of triumph. He was standing at the pinnacle of the company, looking down at the hundreds of faces that made up the corporate hierarchy. And the woman holding the keys to the kingdom was his wife. He adjusted his tie, leaning in close to Vivian, keeping his voice low so the microphone wouldn't catch it. "You played a good game, Viv," he whispered, a tight, forced smile plastered on his face for the audience's benefit. "I don't know how you hid this, but we're going to be a power couple. I can forgive the secrecy. Just play along. Introduce me as the director. We can spin this." Vivian looked at him. Her eyes were dark pools of indifference. She didn't whisper back. She didn't flinch. She simply turned back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian addressed the crowd, her voice steady. "My husband seems to be under the impression that this is a joint celebration. He just whispered that we are a power couple. He believes that my position here automatically grants him immunity and promotion." Scott's smile faltered. He reached for her arm, his grip bruising. "Vivian, don't," he hissed through gritted teeth. Vivian pulled her arm away sharply. "Don't touch me." The rejection was visible to everyone in the front row. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. "You see," Vivian continued, stepping away from him so he stood alone in the center of the stage. "Mr. Aldridge here, Scott, has been very vocal this evening about his ambitions. I heard from several sources tonight that he claimed he was going to clean house. He told people that the new CEO would value young, hungry blood over loyalty and experience." She gestured to the board of directors sitting at a long table near the front. "Is that what we value at Meridian, Scott? Do we value arrogance over integrity?" Scott laughed nervously, waving a hand at the crowd as if this were all a roast. "She's joking. My wife has a dry sense of humor. Of course, I respect the company values. I've given 5 years of my life to this firm." "5 years," Vivian repeated. "Let's talk about those 5 years. Specifically, The last 6 months. She clicked a small remote in her hand. The massive projection screen behind them, which was supposed to display the quarterly earnings, flickered to life. But it didn't show graphs or logistics maps. It showed a timeline. "When my father fell ill," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming solemn, "I stepped away from the public eye to care for him. During that time, I entrusted the regional operations to my managers. I trusted my husband to support me emotionally. Instead, Scott, you told me you were working late every night. You told me the company was demanding everything you had." Scott's face turned grey. He saw where this was going. "Vivian, this is private. Take this off the screen right now, or I swear to God." "But you weren't working, were you?" Vivian interrupted, her voice cutting like a whip. "You were networking, but not for the company." She clicked the remote again. A photo appeared on the screen. It was a high-resolution image taken from a security camera. It showed Scott sitting in a high-end bar, laughing, his arm draped around Sasha. The timestamp was from 3 weeks prior, the night of Vivian's father's funeral. A collective gasp ripped through the ballroom. "I was burying the founder of this company," Vivian said, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage before stabilizing. "And you, my husband, told me you had to handle a crisis at the docks. Is this the crisis, Scott? A martini and a mistress?" Scott felt the room spinning. He looked for an escape route, but the stairs were blocked by 2 large security guards who had quietly moved into position. He was trapped. That's a client!" Scott shouted, pointing at the screen, desperation making his voice shrill. "She's a potential investor. I was closing a deal. You're twisting everything because you're jealous of my success." "A client?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Interesting, because according to your expense reports, you listed that dinner as office supply restocking. That is a $300 round of drinks listed as printer paper, Scott." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cruel, mocking laughter. Scott felt his status disintegrating. He had walked in as a king. Now he was the court jester. "You audited me?" Scott stared at her, betrayed. "You audited your own husband?" "I audited everyone," Vivian corrected him cold. "But you were the only one stealing from me while sleeping in my bed." The humiliation was palpable, heavy in the air like humidity before a storm. But Vivian wasn't done. She wasn't just exposing a cheating husband, she was protecting her company. This was business. "Since you claim the woman in the red dress is a client," Vivian said, scanning the dark room, "why don't we ask her? I believe she's here. Ms. Sasha Miller. Could you please stand up?" Silence stretched out, heads turned, scanning the room. "She's hiding," a voice called out from the back. It was Greg Thorne, the man Scott had bragged to earlier. Greg pointed toward a pillar near the exit. "She's trying to leave." "Please, stop her," Vivian commanded. The security team at the doors gently but firmly blocked the exit. Sasha, tears streaming down her face, mascara running, was guided back toward the brightly lit area near the stage. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had mocked Vivian earlier. She looked like a child caught shoplifting. "Donnie, help me," Sasha wailed, looking up at the stage. Scott turned his back on her. "I don't know her," he muttered into the microphone, his survival instinct overriding everything. "She's a stalker. She's obsessed with me. I've been trying to get rid of her for months, Vivian. You have to believe me." The crowd groaned at his cowardice. Even the most cynical executives looked disgusted. Vivian looked at Scott with pure contempt. "You are truly pathetic, Scott. You parade her around as your future, and the moment things get difficult, you throw her to the wolves." Vivian turned her attention to Sasha, who was now standing near the front row, trembling. "Ms. Miller," Vivian said, her tone softening just a fraction, though still steely. I don't blame you entirely. You were sold a lie. You were told I was a frumpy housewife who held him back. You were told he was the owner of this company. Is that correct? Sasha nodded frantically, sobbing. He told me you were boring. He said he ran Meridian. He said he was going to buy me a penthouse. Ah, yes, the penthouse, Vivian said. She clicked the remote again. A document appeared on the screen. It was a real estate contract for a luxury apartment in Tribeca. I found this in Scott's briefcase this morning, Vivian explained to the audience. A lease agreement. The deposit was $20,000, a significant sum. She turned to Scott. Where did you get $20,000, Scott? We have a joint bank account. I checked it this morning. You haven't made a withdrawal. Scott stayed silent, sweat dripping down his nose. I'll tell you where, Vivian answered for him. She clicked the remote one more time. The screen displayed a complex spreadsheet, highlighted in red. For the last 6 months, Scott has been approving false invoices from a shell company called Miller Logistics. He has been funneling company funds, my funds, into a private account. He used Meridian money to pay for the dinners, the jewelry, the dresses, and the deposit on that apartment. The room went dead silent. Infidelity was a scandal. Embezzlement was a crime. This isn't just a divorce hearing, Scott, Vivian said, her voice ringing with finality. This is a criminal investigation. Scott lunged. Snap! It happened so fast, realizing his life was over, that he wasn't just losing his job but facing prison. Scott's fight-or-flight response kicked in. He lunged for Vivian, perhaps to grab the remote, perhaps just to hurt the person destroying him. You witch! He screamed. But he never reached her. Before he could take 2 steps, a blur of motion intercepted him. It was the head of security, a massive man who had been waiting in the wings. He tackled Scott to the stage floor with a bone-jarring thud. The microphone fell with a screech of feedback. Scott was pinned, his face pressed against the expensive carpet of the stage. Handcuffs clicked, a cold metallic sound that echoed through the stunned ballroom. Vivian didn't even take a step back. She looked down at him, adjusting her diamond necklace. Get him up, she ordered the guard. The guard hauled Scott to his feet. His suit was rumpled, his hair a mess, his dignity completely gone. Scott Aldridge, Vivian said, her voice projecting clearly without the microphone now. You are hereby terminated from Meridian Dynamics for gross misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. You will be escorted off the premises and handed directly to the NYPD officers waiting in the lobby. She leaned in close, so only he and the front row could hear her final blow. And regarding the divorce, you won't be getting half. My lawyers have a prenup that activates in the event of infidelity. You leave this marriage with exactly what you brought to it. Nothing. Vivian, wait! Please! Scott begged, tears finally spilling as reality crashed down. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I love you. Don't let them take me. Take him away, Vivian said, turning her back on him. As the guards dragged a screaming Scott and a sobbing Sasha out of the ballroom, the room remained silent for a long, heavy moment. Then, slowly, one person started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room rose in a standing ovation. It wasn't just for the show. It was for the strength of the woman standing alone on the stage. Vivian took a deep breath, composing herself. She approached the podium again. But just as she was about to speak, to transition back to business, the double doors at the back of the room burst open again. The drama wasn't over. A tall, elderly man with silver hair and a walking cane marched in, followed by 2 lawyers. It was Scott's father, a man known for his ruthlessness and his connections in the city. and he didn't look happy. "Stop this right now," the old man bellowed, pointing his cane at Vivian. "You aren't arresting my son." Vivian narrowed her eyes. She had handled the husband. Now, she had to handle the dynasty that created him. The applause died instantly. The air in the ballroom grew thick again, the tension shifting from triumph to a new, sharper kind of danger. Marcus Aldridge, Scott's father, was a legend in New York real estate, and not for his charity. He was a man who bulldozed landmarks to build high-rises and buried lawsuits under mountains of cash. He marched down the center aisle, his cane clicking rhythmically on the marble, his face a mask of thunderous fury. Behind him trailed two men in grey suits carrying briefcases, his personal legal sharks. "Get my son out of those handcuffs!" Marcus barked at the security team, holding Scott near the exit. "Do you know who I am? I can buy this hotel and turn it into a parking lot by morning." The security guards hesitated, looking toward the stage for instruction. Scott, seeing his father, slumped in relief. Dad, she's crazy. She's framing me. Help me." Vivian didn't move. She watched her father-in-law approach with the same cool detachment she had shown her husband. She had expected this. In fact, she had counted on it. "Let him go!" Marcus shouted, reaching the front of the room and turning to glare up at Vivian. "Or I will rain so much litigation on this company it will be buried until the next century." Vivian tapped the microphone. "Mr. Aldridge, welcome. I was wondering when you'd show up. I assume Scott texted you the moment he realized his little charade was falling apart." "You listen to me, you ungrateful girl," Marcus sneered, ignoring the crowd. "You think because your father left you this company you can play God? You're nothing. You're a gardener, a housewife. You manipulated my son." "I manipulated him?" Vivian asked, a dry laugh escaping her. "Marcus, your son embezzled nearly $500,000 from Meridian Dynamics. He committed fraud. He forged invoices. The police are on their way. Unless you're confessing to being an accomplice, I suggest you step aside." Marcus slammed his cane on the edge of the stage. "Embezzlement? Please. It's a misunderstanding, a clerical error. I will write a check right now for whatever amount you claim is missing. 500,000. Fine. Here." He reached into his jacket pocket for a checkbook. "Now release him." It was a power move. He was treating a felony like a spilled drink he could pay to clean up. Vivian shook her head slowly. "You think money fixes everything, don't you? That's why Scott is the way he is. You taught him that consequences are for poor people." "I'm teaching you how the real world works," Marcus hissed. "Take the check. Drop the charges. Save your marriage. If you send him to jail, Vivian, I promise you, I will destroy you. I have friends on the regulatory board. I can have Meridian's shipping licenses revoked. I can freeze your assets. I will make sure you end up working the night shift at a diner." The threat hung in the air. The board members looked nervous. Marcus Aldridge had the power to do exactly what he threatened. "Is that a threat, Marcus?" Vivian asked calmly. "It's a promise." Vivian looked at the crowd, then back at Marcus. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm glad you brought that up, because while Scott was busy stealing from me, I was busy looking into your business dealings, Marcus. Specifically, the land acquisition for your new Aldridge Tower in Brooklyn." Marcus froze. His hand hovering over his checkbook stopped. "What are you talking about?" "The shipping containers," Vivian said, her voice clear. "The ones you used Meridian trucks to move off the books last month. Scott authorized it. He thought he was helping Daddy with a favor, but he didn't check the manifest." She signaled the tech booth. The screen behind her changed again. This time, it showed a series of shipping manifests and a police report from a raided warehouse. "Your son didn't just embezzle money, Marcus. He used my company's logistics network to transport hazardous construction waste you were trying to dump illegally to avoid disposal fees. That's not just fraud. That's environmental crime. That's federal. Marcus's face went from red to pale white in a heartbeat. You wouldn't, he whispered. I already did, Vivian replied. The EPA has the files, the district attorney has the files, and the FBI, she pointed to the back of the room where the NYPD officers were now being joined by agents in windbreakers, is right there. The agents weren't there for Scott. They were there for Marcus. Scott is a thief, Vivian said, looking down at the defeated patriarch. But you, Marcus, you're a felon, and you just walked right into the net. The agents moved in. Marcus Aldridge, you have the right to remain silent. The room erupted into chaos. Scott was screaming as he was dragged out and door. Marcus was shouting legal threats as he was handcuffed and led out the other. The two men who thought they owned the world were dismantled in under 10 minutes by the woman they had both dismissed. Vivian stood alone on the stage, the debris of her personal life being swept away by law enforcement. She looked tired, but she stood tall. She leaned into the mic one last time. Now, does anyone else have any objections to my leadership? Silence. Absolute, terrified, respectful silence. Good, she said. Then let's have dinner. 3 months later. The office of the CEO of Meridian Dynamics was quiet. The view from the top floor looked out over the Manhattan skyline, a view Scott had coveted, but never earned. Vivian sat at the massive oak desk, reviewing the quarterly reports. Profits were up 15%. Employee retention was at an all-time high. The cleansing of the toxic old boys club culture had worked, but success was lonely. Vivian sighed, rubbing her temples. She had won the war, but the house felt empty. The divorce was finalized quickly. Scott, facing 5 to 10 years in prison, had signed everything to get a slightly reduced sentence. Marcus was under house arrest awaiting trial, his empire crumbling under fines. She was free, but she was tired. There was a knock at the door. Come in, Vivian said, straightening up. It was her assistant, Sarah. Miss Aldridge, there's a visitor for you. He doesn't have an appointment, but... Well, he says he knows you. Vivian frowned. Who is it? He says his name is Ethan Vance. Vivian paused. Vance. That name wasn't on her list of competitors, but it sounded vaguely familiar. She quickly scanned her mental Rolodex, but came up blank. Send him in. A moment later, the door opened. A man walked in who looked nothing like the corporate sharks Vivian was used to. He wore a simple charcoal sweater and jeans, though the watch on his wrist cost more than a house. He had messy dark hair, and eyes that looked like they were laughing. Vivian Aldridge, he said, extending a hand. Or should I say, the woman who took down the Aldridge family single-handedly. I'm a fan. Vivian stood, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm. Mr. Vance, to what do I owe the pleasure? Are you here to capitalize on the chaos and try to buy us out? Ethan laughed, taking a seat uninvited. Buy you out? God, no. I watched the video of that gala. I'd be terrified to go against you. No, I'm here because I run Vance Global Logistics in London. We handle the European corridor. I know the company, Vivian said, her interest piqued. You're the tech genius who revolutionized drone delivery in the UK. Guilty, Ethan grinned. Look, the Asian markets are opening up. Meridian is strong in the US. Vance is strong in Europe. Together, we'd be untouchable. Plus, he hesitated, looking a bit sheepish. Plus I heard you have a strict no-liars policy, Ethan smiled. And I've been looking for someone honest in this industry for 10 years. It's lonely at the top when you can't trust anyone, isn't it? Vivian looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the fatigue behind his smile, the same fatigue she felt. He wasn't hitting on her. He wasn't trying to manipulate her. He was recognizing a kindred spirit. "It is," she admitted softly. "So," Ethan leaned forward. "Business first. I have a proposal, a joint venture. We test it for 6 months. If you hate me, we walk away. If it works, we rewrite the map." Vivian looked at the proposal he slid across the desk. It was fair, generous even. "And what do you get out of this, besides market share?" she asked. Ethan looked out the window. "I get to work with someone who isn't afraid to burn it all down to do the right thing. That's rare, Vivian. That's worth more than stock options." Vivian picked up her pen. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of excitement that had nothing to do with revenge or survival. It was hope. "One condition," she said. "Name it." "You never ever call me a power couple." Ethan laughed, a genuine, rich sound. "Deal." 1 year later, the visiting room at the correctional facility in upstate New York was a monochromatic nightmare of gray steel and scuffed linoleum. The air was thick, carrying the distinct, suffocating scent of industrial bleach and stale, burnt coffee, a smell that seemed to cling to the clothes of anyone unfortunate enough to walk through the heavy security doors. Vivian Aldridge sat on a bolted-down metal stool on the free side of the reinforced glass partition. She was a vision of contrast in this bleak environment. She wore a coat of soft, camel-colored cashmere, and her hair was styled in loose, elegant waves that caught the harsh fluorescent light. She didn't look like a woman who was visiting a prison. She looked like a woman who had just stepped out of a boardroom meeting to handle a minor administrative annoyance. Her posture was straight, her hands folded calmly on the scratched laminate counter. On the other side of the glass, the door buzzed. Inmate number 8940 shuffled in. Scott Aldridge looked as though 20 years had passed in the span of 12 months. The man who had once spent hundreds of dollars a month on skincare and haircuts was gone. In his place was a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure. His hair, once his pride, was thinning rapidly, grey patches spreading like wildfire across his scalp. His skin was sallow, the result of a year without direct sunlight, and his prison jumpsuit hung loosely on a frame that had withered from stress. The arrogance that had once defined his very existence, the sneer, the swagger, the condescending tilt of his chin, had been scrubbed away, leaving only a jittery, nervous energy. He sat down, picking up the black phone receiver with trembling hands. Vivian watched him, her expression unreadable. She picked up her own receiver. "Vivian," he rasped. His voice was thin, lacking the booming confidence he used to project in meeting rooms. You actually came." "I told you I would come one last time, Scott," Vivian said. Her voice was calm, devoid of malice, but also completely devoid of the warmth that had once been his safe harbor. "I'm here to bring you the final papers regarding the dissolution of the estate." Scott swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing prominently. "The estate? Is it done?" "It's done," Vivian confirmed. She didn't look down at her notes. She knew the facts by heart. "The sale of the house in the Hamptons closed yesterday. The liquid assets from your personal accounts were seized 6 months ago. As per the court order, your entire share has been garnered to pay restitution to Meridian Dynamics." Scott slumped against the hard plastic of his chair. A flicker of his old greed sparked in his eyes, only to be extinguished instantly by reality. Nothing. They took the car, the vintage watch collection. "Viv, that Rolex was a gift from my grandfather." "Everything," Vivian said, her tone cutting through his pity party. "You stole nearly $500,000, Scott. You forged documents. You defrauded the company I own. The restitution covers the theft, the legal fees, and the audit costs. You have 0 debt remaining, which is a mercy, but you also have 0 assets. You are starting from 0. Scott looked down at the metal counter, tracing a deep scratch with his fingernail. I heard about Dad. The stroke. Vivian's face softened, but only slightly. It was a tragedy, but one of their own making. He's in a state-run care facility now. Since the federal government froze the Aldridge family trust and seized the properties to cover the environmental fines, private care wasn't an option. The nurses say he's comfortable, physically. He asks for you sometimes, but most days he just stares at the wall. He doesn't remember the empire he tried to protect. Tears welled up in Scott's eyes, spilling over onto his cheeks. He wiped them away with the rough fabric of his sleeve. I wanted to be somebody, Viv. I wanted to be like him. I wanted people to look at me the way they look at the guys in the magazines. I thought if I had the suit, the girl, the title, I thought that made me a king. You were somebody, Vivian said softly. You were my husband. You were a regional manager at a billion-dollar company. You had a home. You had respect. But it wasn't enough for you. You wanted the image, not the work. She stood up, smoothing the front of her coat. The movement signaled the end. There was nothing left to say. The anger she had felt on that stage a year ago had burned itself out, leaving behind only a distant pity. Vivian, wait. Scott pressed his palm against the glass, his eyes wide with a sudden, desperate panic. What about us? I mean, I'll be out in 4 years with good behavior. I've learned my lesson, Viv, I swear. Maybe when I get out, we could get coffee, just to catch up. Vivian looked at him, and for the first time during the visit, a small, sad smile touched her lips. It wasn't a cruel smile, but it was the sound of a door locking forever. Goodbye, Scott. She hung up the phone. She didn't wait to see his reaction. She turned and walked out of the visiting room, the heavy steel doors clanging shut behind her, with a finality that echoed in her bones. The air outside the prison was crisp and cold, tasting of pine and freedom. Vivian took a deep breath, filling her lungs, exhaling the stale atmosphere of the past. A sleek, black sedan was waiting at the curb, engine idling purringly. The back door opened before she even reached it. Ethan Vance stepped out, holding a tablet in one hand. He wore a heavy wool coat over a charcoal suit, his dark hair tousled by the wind. He looked at her, his expression searching. Grim, he asked, studying her face. Necessary, Vivian replied, sliding into the leather interior. The warmth of the car enveloped her immediately. It's done. The chapter is officially closed. I don't think I'll ever have to come back here. Ethan nodded, closing the door behind her and sliding into the seat next to her. Good, because the future is demanding, and it doesn't leave much time for looking in the rear-view mirror. He handed her a thick manila folder. The London merger is official as of this morning. The regulatory bodies in the UK just signed off. Meridian Global is now legally the largest logistics provider in the Northern Hemisphere. Vivian took the folder, her mind shifting gears instantly. The weight of the sadness lifted, replaced by the thrill of the challenge. Did we secure the donation for the youth scholarship program? I don't want to announce the merger without giving something back to the community immediately. Doubled it, Ethan grinned, a genuine boyish expression that made him look younger than his years. I told the investors that if they didn't match our contribution, I'd tell you they were being cheap. They're all terrified of you, you know. The Iron Lady of Logistics is the current nickname in the Financial Times. Good, Vivian laughed, the sound bright and unburdened. Fear keeps them honest, but respect keeps them working. As the car merged onto the highway, speeding back toward the glittering promise of New York City, the landscape blurred past. Miles away, on a forgotten stretch of Route 9, a small roadside diner sat beneath a flickering neon sign. It was a greasy spoon, the kind of place where the menu was laminated and sticky, and the smell of frying onions permeated the walls. Inside, the lunch rush was in full swing. The clatter of plates and the roar of the grill were deafening. Sasha Miller wiped down table 4 with a grey, damp rag. She wore a stained yellow apron over a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. Her feet, encased in sensible, ugly orthopedic shoes, throbbed with a dull ache that never seemed to go away. Her once long, perfectly manicured nails were short, chipped, and practical. There was no money for manicures anymore. There was barely money for rent. "Hey, honey, coffee over here. I've been waiting 10 minutes. A customer in a trucker hat shouted, waving his empty mug aggressively. "Coming," Sasha sighed, pushing a stray strand of hair out of her face with the back of her wrist. The exhaustion was etched into the corners of her eyes. She hurried over to the booth, grabbing the coffee pot. As she poured the steaming black liquid, her eyes drifted to the small television mounted in the corner of the room. It was tuned to a national news channel. "And in business news," the anchor announced, Vivian Aldridge, the CEO of the newly formed retail giant Meridian Global, has been named Businesswoman of the Year. Here she is, pictured earlier today on the balcony of the stock exchange. Sasha froze. The coffee pot hovered in midair. On the screen, Vivian looked radiant. She was wearing a sharp, navy power suit, standing next to Ethan Vance. They were laughing, holding a crystal award between them. Vivian looked powerful. She looked kind, and most devastatingly of all to Sasha. She looked happy. It was a window into a life Sasha had thought she was stealing, only to realize she had been fighting for the scraps while Vivian owned the table. "Hey, are you deaf? Watch the cup!" the customer barked as the coffee neared the brim. Sasha snapped out of her trance, a jolt of shame running through her. She looked at the screen one last time, at the woman who had won not by playing dirty, but by playing smart. "I'm sorry," Sasha whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the diner. She wasn't apologizing to the customer. She was apologizing to herself for the years she had wasted chasing a mirage. She set the pot down and went back to wiping the table. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. Gold diggers eventually hit rock bottom, while those who build their own mountains get to enjoy the view. That evening, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was transformed. It was the same venue where Scott had humiliated her a year ago, but the energy in the room was unrecognizable. The sycophants, the climbers, and the fakes had been weeded out. The room was filled with innovators, partners, and employees who were there to build, not to pose. Vivian stood at the podium. The spotlight hit her, but this time it didn't feel like an interrogation. It felt like a coronation. She looked out at the sea of faces. Silence fell over the room, not out of shock, but out of genuine respect. "A year ago," Vivian began, her voice ringing clear and steady through the microphone, "I stood on this stage and watched my personal life fall apart. I learned a painful lesson that night. I learned that trust is expensive and betrayal is cheap." She paused, her gaze sweeping the front row until it landed on Ethan. He was watching her with a look of absolute pride, a slight nod encouraging her on. "But I also learned that the truth is the most powerful asset you can own," she continued. My ex-husband thought that power came from a title, a bespoke suit, and the appearance of success. He thought power was something you showed off to make others feel small. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intimate, intense register that captivated the room. He was wrong. Power isn't what you show off. Power is what you do when the lights are off. It's the work you put in when no one is clapping. It's the integrity you keep when it would be easier to lie. Meridian Global isn't just a logistics company anymore. It's a promise that we value the truth above the image. She raised her champagne flute high. To the future. May we earn it every single day. To the future! The crowd roared back, the sound vibrating against the crystal chandeliers. As the music swelled and the celebration began, Vivian walked down the stairs. She didn't stumble. She didn't look back. Ethan met her at the bottom of the steps, offering her his arm with a gentlemanly grace that Scott had never possessed. "That was quite a speech," Ethan said, leading her toward the dance floor. Although, I have to say, Scott did get one thing right that night. Vivian raised an eyebrow, a playful smile dancing on her lips. "Oh? And what was that?" I find it hard to believe he was right about anything. "He called you a power couple. Prematurely," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling with mischief and affection. "He just had the wrong partner." Vivian laughed, a sound of pure, unburdened joy that rose above the music. She squeezed his arm, feeling the solid reality of the man beside her. "You might be right," she said. "Come on, partner. Let's get to work." The camera pans out, leaving the happy, bustling ballroom, moving through the arched window and rising up into the New York night sky. The lights of the city shine like diamonds, diamonds that are real, sharp, and unbreakable. And that is the story of how one arrogant man lost everything by underestimating the quiet woman standing right beside him. It's a powerful reminder that true value isn't found in flashy suits or secret affairs, but in integrity, hard work, and loyalty. Scott chased the appearance of success and ended up with nothing, while Vivian built real success on a foundation of truth. What did you think of Vivian's revenge? Did Scott deserve a harsher punishment, or was losing his freedom and his fortune enough? And what about Sasha? Do you think she learned her lesson in that diner? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please crush that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more drama, twists, and real-life lessons coming your way every week. Thanks for listening, and remember, be careful who you betray, because you never know who's really holding the keys to the kingdom. See you in the next video.